In this episode, you'll discover the pivotal moments when real survivors felt everything shift and how you can implement those same turning points to create measurable biological changes that support healing. You've been told it's incurable, but here at Renegade Remission, we believe in rewriting the story. If you're facing a terminal or chronic illness, you are not alone. I'm Eleni Welch, certified nutritionist, and each week I share healing strategies and remission stories to help you take control of your health, feel better, and rediscover hope. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. In this episode, you'll discover how emotional clarity, safety, and purpose can create real physiological changes and learn how to create those same pivotal moments in your own healing journey. One of the most striking things I've discovered from survival stories, and something that shows up often in both memoirs and medical literature, is that healing rarely begins with a perfect lifestyle or the right quote-unquote treatment. It often begins with a moment, a shift, a realization, a biological change or a physical change, or just simply a decision to live differently. Sometimes it happens at the lowest point, sometimes at a moment of peace, and sometimes it arrives unexpectedly through connection, compassion, or clarity. These shifts may feel intangible, but research in psychoneuroimmunology, neuroplasticity, and social genomics show that they can have real biological effects. They can change stress hormones, immune behavior, inflammation, and even gene expression. So today I want to share real stories, one from a radical remission survivor memoir, and one from a documented neurological recovery. Each illustrates how a single moment can ripple through the body in profound ways. Our first story is a survivor story publicly shared through the Radical Remission Project, and it's Sarah's story. Sarah was in her early 40s when she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer that had spread to her bones and liver. Her oncologist spoke gently but directly. Treatment might slow things down, but long-term survival was unlikely. She began chemotherapy, but the physical and emotional toll was staggering. She described feeling like her life was shrinking into fear, medical appointments, and anticipatory grief. And then came her turning point. One morning, after a night of pain and no sleep, she found herself staring at a small stack of old sketchbooks she hadn't touched since college. She remembered how alive she felt when she drew, how it quieted her mind and reconnected her to something deeper. She opened one almost without thinking, picked up a pencil, and started drawing again. Sarah later said, "It was the first time in months that I remembered I was still a person, not just a patient." And that shift, that turning point, sparked a cascade of changes. She started drawing every day, 5 minutes, sometimes 15. She made tiny adjustments to her meals so they felt nourishing and fulfilling. She took gentle walks. She let friends come and sit with her and talk or sit in silence. She began meditating to help her body settle. She consciously chose to add small pockets of joy back into her life. Not because she thought they would cure her cancer, but because they made her feel alive again. Over the following months, she noticed subtle improvements. Her pain decreased, her energy lifted, and her scans began showing favorable changes. Eventually, she experienced a significant reduction in tumor burden and long-term stability well beyond her prognosis. Sarah's account is self-reported, and her medical details were not published in a clinical journal, but that doesn't make it any less powerful or reliable. What I want us to get from it is that turning point, that moment when she remembered she was more than her illness. It's a powerful example of how memoir survivors describe the beginning of their healing journey. The next story is a verified neurological recovery from something called locked-in syndrome following brainstem stroke. It's published in 2013 in Neurocritical Care by Hawker S. et al. Locked-in syndrome is one of the most devastating neurological conditions. A person is fully conscious but almost entirely paralyzed, capable only of vertical eye movement. Meaningful recovery is extremely rare, but it does happen. In one documented case, a man developed locked-in syndrome following a brainstem stroke. His early days were filled with fear, grief, and profound physiological stress. High cortisol, elevated heart rate, fragmented sleep, all factors that hinder neurological recovery. But over time, his care team and family created a consistent environment of emotional safety. They used calm tones of voices, gentle touch, reassuring presence, and moments of genuine connection. These experiences coincided with measurable improvements. First, tiny eye movements, then small facial twitches, then limited limb movement. With intensive rehabilitation and a supportive emotional environment, he eventually regained the ability to communicate clearly and walk with assistance. Neurologists published these cases because recovery from locked-in syndrome challenges long-standing assumptions about neuroplasticity. The brain's capacity to rewire, particularly when stress decreases and emotional safety increases, is far greater than previously believed. Here's what we know about the science behind each of these turning points. The first is that emotional breakthroughs reduce stress load and improve the body's healing capacity. Chronic stress is one of the most biologically damaging states a body can be in. When stress becomes long-term, it raises cortisol, disrupts sleep, impairs immune surveillance, and increases systemic inflammation, all of which make it harder for the body to repair damaged cells or respond effectively to illness. What researchers like Bruce McEwen and Peter Giannaros have shown is that emotional relief, even if it arrives in a single moment, can begin to shift this internal landscape. Their work in Physiological Reviews in 2011 explains that emotional breakthroughs decrease what's called allostatic load, which is the cumulative wear and tear that stress imposes on the body over time. When stress softens and when the body stops bracing for impact, cortisol rhythms begin to normalize, inflammatory signaling decreases, and the immune system becomes more precise. It's not that a single moment cures anything, it's that the moment signals to your body you are safe enough to begin repairing again. And if you have enough of those moments, you can repair. This is why survivors often describe feeling something open or release inside of them long before their physical symptoms began to change. The second thing science has shown us is that turning points activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's healing branch. The autonomic nervous system has two primary modes: sympathetic, which is fight, flight, hypervigilance, and parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, and repair. Many people living with chronic or life-threatening illness spend months, sometimes years, in sympathetic dominance. This keeps the body in survival mode, not healing mode. Turning points often bring a sensation of peace, clarity, acceptance, or meaning, and neurophysiological research shows that these emotional states reliably increase vagal tone, a measure of parasympathetic or rest, digest, and repair activation. In their influential 2009 review, Thayer and Lane explain how increased vagal tone improves heart rate variability, reduces inflammatory output, enhances digestion and immune accuracy, and supports mitochondrial efficiency. All of these changes create conditions more favorable for healing. The body's healing processes are not passive, they do require physiological permission, a shift out of defense and into restoration, and turning points, such as the ones described in these survivor stories, often serve as that catalyst. The third thing that science has revealed to us is that purpose-driven emotion influences immune and inflammatory pathways. When a person reconnects with a dream, a relationship, a project, or a sense of purpose and meaning, it activates reward pathways in the brain associated with dopamine and other neurochemicals linked to motivation and resilience. Research by Carol Reif and Burton Singer have shown that individuals with a strong sense of purpose exhibit healthier inflammatory profiles, more stable cortisol output, and better cardiovascular and immune function. Their 1998 publication in Psychological Science demonstrates that psychological well-being influences key physiological processes, including cytokine regulation and oxidative stress. This means that when survivors describe a turning point triggered by purpose, like deciding to write a book, reconnecting with family, traveling to a place they've always longed to see, or choosing to live differently, their emotions are initiating biochemical changes that support survival. Purpose is not just thinking positive, it's a physiological orientation towards life that changes how the body operates. The fourth thing research has shown us is that compassion and connection release oxytocin, which is a hormone that supports healing across systems. Moments of genuine connection, whether it's being held, understood, or reassured, such as we heard in the case study of the man suffering from locked-in syndrome, these things trigger the release of oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. But oxytocin is far more than a bonding chemical. Research conducted in 2015 by Kirsten Uvnas-Moberg and colleagues shows that oxytocin counteracts stress hormones such as cortisol. It lowers inflammation, reduces pain perception, enhances immune efficiency, and even supports wound healing and neuroplasticity. When people describe turning points sparked by compassion, a nurse holding a hand, a friend saying, "I'm here," a moment of forgiveness, these interactions are not just touching emotionally, they alter the neurochemistry in ways that directly support healing. Oxytocin creates a physiological environment where the body can shift from hyperarousal to restoration. Connection is not a luxury in illness, it's a biological resource and necessity. And the fifth thing we've learned about turning points through research is that emotional shifts influence gene expression through social genomics. Steve Cole's landmark 2014 review in PLOS Genetics shows that feelings of safety, connection, hope, and support downregulate genes associated with chronic inflammation and upregulate genes involved in antiviral defense, tissue repair, and immune coordination. This research demonstrates that emotional states do not stay in the mind. They translate into measurable changes in which genes get turned on or off. A turning point, whether it's acceptance, surrender, clarity, or reconnection, can create a genomic shift away from inflammation and towards healing. And it helps explain why so many survivors trace their recovery back to a single moment when something inside of them shifted and the body followed suit. Here are some practical action steps you can take today to engage in these same types of turning points as the survivors shared in the stories we learned about today. One is to create a moment of emotional safety. This might be a calming breath, a prayer, journaling, or simply sitting with someone who makes you feel safe. The second is to identify a source of purpose in your life. A project, a relationship, a dream you have, or a daily ritual that reminds your body there is a reason to move forward. The third thing you can do is to support your parasympathetic nervous system intentionally. Try slow exhalations, humming, gentle stretching, warm showers, dinner by candlelight, or grounding exercises such as walking barefoot outside. The fourth thing is to reach out to one person or community that makes you feel safe and supported. Connection, as we saw in the case of locked-in syndrome, is medicine. And the fifth is to let go of one emotional burden. Acknowledging fear or grief without judgment can shift your entire internal environment. By the way, if these action steps sound familiar, it's because they are. I share these same steps in many episodes because they are the crucial foundation of your healing journey, and we need to lay that foundation before we can begin to rebuild the house. The turning points we shared today are moments where the body, brain, and heart align just enough to create the possibility of change. You don't need to force them. You simply need to create the space so that they can happen organically and on their own. Your story still has room for a dramatic shift. In our next episode, we'll discuss the universal anti-disease diet and what all remission stories share in common. So stay tuned for that episode, and until then, go be renegades.